Museum Center, and I've been there. This is I'm about to start my 36th year. I started in 1990. It wasn't my first job, as you can tell by the gray hair of what I have left. And we're going to tag team this thing tonight. So Jeff is going to introduce himself in a second. But Jeff just mentioned something to me before that I never really made this connection. But Jeff is an allergist. And any of you guys know who George Revachol is? Oh my God. He knows who he is. He knows who he is because what George Revachol did was he discovered what became Benadryl. So, yes.
Allergy,
Benadryl. So we are both benefits of George Revachol. He endowed the position at the Museum Center, and of course, I'm sure you learned a lot. So George was at University of Cincinnati Medical School, and him and a partner discovered this antihistamine that was more powerful than anyone they'd ever seen before. And he asked his partner, "Are you interested in pursuing this?" And his partner said, "No." That's mistake number one. Then he asked the University of Cincinnati if they were interested. They said no. So you can't get away with that today. When you do work at a university, that becomes yours. But he went to Park Davis in Detroit, and he literally spent the last 20 years of his life giving away his money. And he was interested in archaeology. And I can tell you all sorts of stories about George, but I'm not going to do that here. So let's have Jeff introduce himself.
So I am Jeff Leipzig, local physician, and I've become somewhat of a historian of Fortified Hill. Never thought that I would actually be that way, but it's been a wonderful journey. And obviously I need to thank all of you for being part of that, because without people's support in the community, this would have never happened. So we're going to go ahead and let Bob talk about Fortified Hill a little bit, and I'm going to step in it a little bit later, and we're going to go back and forth.
Yeah, so we're going to tag team this, and we haven't done this before. We talked about it, but we're going to see how this works out. So he's going to nudge me off the stage if I go into his part, so we'll do that. Just want to, before we start, I really want to thank Pyramid Hill Sculpture Park for all the work and the money they've put into this. And letting us do what we want to do out there. We have developed a management plan on how this works, and the staff and Nancy and Lonnie have been very great about letting us do that. So all this stuff that's being done, there's a lot of it's being done by volunteers. Jeff is going to talk about site clearing, all the stuff that we've done out there. But we really wanted to make this a public place, but we also wanted to do it respectfully, because this is a sacred site. So we worked with some of our tribal partners that we had developed at the Cincinnati Museum Center through our NAGPR work, which is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So they were very grateful in doing that, and you'll see when we get through that slide when we go through this. So let's look at some images here. Okay, so this is an ideal look at Fortified Hill. It doesn't look like this, obviously, because it has forested, but this is a map that is using the data that we know from the site. So people at the University of Cincinnati, they started reconstructing these earthworks 25 years ago using digital data. So they know how high the walls are, they know where they are, so they reconstruct them. And you can actually do flyovers. If you do these, you can just fly in and out between the gateways and all this sort of stuff, and they've done many exhibits using this in the past. But one of the reasons you'll see this is the Great Miami that you see down here. This is situated at a very high point. And when I show you the last slide in this presentation, you will be able to see, I want you to look at it, you'll tell where the site is, even though it's all forested, because it just peaks up right at the end. So it's the terminal ridge up in the air. So what I thought we'd do is quickly go over some time periods here. Since I'm an archaeologist, I have to do this. So this is sort of a general sequence in time here, going back about 10,000 BC, which is 12,000 years ago, even 13,000 years ago. We know that people were here. They were probably here before that. They haven't left those remains for us to study and date in this area of Ohio. And other parts of the U.S., we do see that. And everything you see from here, it's just, there's not a lot there. It's mostly flint and stone. Everything else just disintegrates. There's that saying, love is fleeting, stone tools are forever. And that's the way I look at this early period here. So, and then these next three periods we refer to as archaic periods, and because we stayed up all night thinking up these time zones, they're early, middle, and late. This takes us up to about 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago. These people are very mobile, hunters and gatherers. They're not agriculturalists. They're not even quite yet horticulturalists, but that all changes when you go to this next period. So early woodland or Adena, middle woodland or Hopewell. These two here, Adena and Hopewell, and that goes to about 1,600 years ago. These are the things that usually people refer to as mound builders. Adena folks built really, really tall mounds. So Miamisburg Mound up in Dayton, in Miamisburg, is an Adena mound. The Great Mound up in Butler County up here is an Adena mound. There was a mound in downtown Cincinnati that was 29 foot tall. It was an Adena mound. One in Newtown, Ohio, that was 39 feet tall, also an Adena mound. The Hopewell mounds are usually shorter and smaller. They're not as tall, but Hopewell is known for the earthworks, and that's the time period that we're going to talk about today. And after that, once you get through this section, when you get into Fort Ancient, these are agriculturalists. They live in village sites, and they are subsisting on maize, beans, squash, and they hunt anything that moves or doesn't move. So they left at these enormous village sites. And most archaeologists today focus on those village sites because you can answer most of your questions by staying in one place. If you want to deal with these people, you've got to dig a whole bunch of sites because they're mobile. They don't stick around very far. They are chasing resources seasonally. But when you live in a village, you're staying pretty much fit. Okay. So what is Hopewell? So it's not an indigenous term. We would love to use an indigenous term for it, but our native partners don't have a name for Hopewell. It's named after Mordecai Hopewell near Chillicothe from his estate, where a lot of these sites are. But it's more like a cultural overlay. It's things that we recognize. So there. Oh, I'm not talking into the mic? Okay. Sorry, I was trying to figure out what that gesture was, but all right. Go ahead, next slide. So, again, what they're best known for is this stuff. And these really, really precise earthworks that are seen best from the sky. So when you think about it, these people, a couple of thousand years ago, built these earthworks. They couldn't see it from the sky, but we can. And when I talk to our tribal partners today, they think that's absolutely marvelous that they can now see these from the sky. And that's the way that they're mostly interpreted and looked at. So you see a lot of geometry. You see a square, you see a circle. And you see another circle up here. You also see these parallel walls in a lot of these. Here's an octagon and a circle. So this is Newark earthworks. Next one. So because of all these earthworks and village sites, the Cincinnati area and southern Ohio became like the focus for archaeology in the 19th century. This is where all the big and best sites were, right down here. So you have people like this. This is Frederick Ward Putnam from Peabody Museum at Harvard. Here he is in Newtown at an excavation in a mound. Now, Frederick didn't dig this himself. They had other people dig it. So if you want to know the difference between 19th century archaeologists and archaeologists today, we do our own work. These guys had somebody else do it. And there's another doctor here, Dr. Charles Metz, who was a physician who lived in Madisonville in Cincinnati. He dug a whole bunch of these sites. He mapped all the sites in Anderson, Columbia Township, in Hamilton County. He dug a lot of stuff. He dug at the Madisonville site, which is how Harvard got involved. So Harvard, American Museum of Natural History, the Field Museum, all these places were digging here. Next slide. So they found a lot of stuff. So anybody recognize this earthwork? What? No, it's Fort Ancient. So these are the walls. This is the South Fort, North Fort. So this is Fort Ancient. This is another one that John Hancock put together. These earthworks were everywhere. And if you think about it, it's the most visible remnant that shows us that Native people were here. I mean, obviously we can find stuff in plowed fields. We can find spear points and that sort of stuff. But these earthworks are above grade. They're above ground. So we know that these people were here. And Native Americans will tell you that they recognize this as that everyone knows they're here because of these earthworks. You really can't say they weren't. We also have these thousands of these campsites and villages, which are absolutely everywhere. Next slide. So somebody mentioned Serpent. So this is Serpent Mound. Serpent is probably the most famous earthwork, not only in Ohio, but in North America. It is not Hopewell, although there are questions about its age. The prevailing theory is that these are Adena, so slightly before Hopewell, although people with the Ohio History Connection think that it is Fort Ancient, so later. They each have a suite of competing radiocarbon dates, and they simply, after that they don't talk to each other much. It's like they don't say which one it is. So the reasons people have asked, and I had this question asked to me today, why is this site not in the UNESCO World Heritage thing? It's the wrong time period. And we'll talk about these. They're sitting over here on this in a bit. When we get to these are Hopewell in age. So the only way they could get this through UNESCO was they have it really tightly constructed, and they took earthworks of the same age. At some point, Serpent will be put in, and it should be as easy as can possibly be. How many of you guys have been to Serpent? Jeez, that's like the whole crowd. Yeah. I mean, it's like a spiritual experience. It's really kind of cool. Okay. So another one is Turner. This one is in Hamilton County. And I like to use this as an example of, so the Fort Hill has been preserved through the races of Pyramid Hill Sculpture Park and Nancy Lonnie. Also, Dr. what's his name? Barrich. Beforehand, sorry, escaped me. He's going to talk about that, not me. And so people have preserved this site, and it's still here. This site is a gravel pit, except for a few, wherever the high walls are up here, where the gravel pit is, it was gravelled away. And just to show you some of the engineering that goes on in these, this is one landform. This one is 40 foot higher. So they put a graded way over a stream. So the stream runs under, like a French drain, underneath this graded way. So there really is a feat of engineering to do this. This site was at least partially excavated by Peabody Museum at Harvard in the late 19th century. Next slide.
I'm going to take over. Oh. All right, so I'm going to talk about more of the European history. Bob spoke about the Native American history. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many people know who owned this desk and where is it located? James McBride. And where is it located? It's upstairs, second floor. So on your way out, maybe Brian will open it up and you guys can take a look at it. But again, I think that's just some wonderful history. So next slide. So let's talk about James McBride. Here's a picture of James McBride. Somebody drew a portrait of him. And if you go to Greenwood Cemetery, you can see where he and his wife have been married, been buried. Go on to him. Next slide. So James McBride, let's talk about James McBride. What do we know about James McBride? Well, he was a very early pioneer, came here when he was 18 years old, so about 1805, 1806. So think about how undeveloped Hamilton was and how Butler County was undeveloped at that point. He was very self-educated, so he taught himself how to read, how to write. So again, this is somebody that had a lot of knowledge, and he put it to good use. He was the first printing press he brought to the area, first hotel called the Hamilton Hotel. We're going to talk about that. He was the first mayor of Hamilton. So when I went to City Council and talked about Fortified Hill, I showed a picture of James McBride, and I said, anybody know who this is? City Council, mayor, anybody know? Nobody knew. So it was great. But he was also somebody that owned 5,000 books. So again, somebody that collected lots of books. Among the things that he did was he was a tax collector. He was the sheriff. He was the treasurer. He's the recorder. He's the postmaster. He did everything, you know. He was involved in canals, bridges, turnpikes. He was involved in railroads. So a lot of things that you kind of take for granted, these were things that James McBride set the tone for in this area. And then critical, he actually was one that helped found and stay with Miami University. So at his death, he was the president, he was the trustee president. And James McBride, or McBride Hall, is in Miami. So if you think of McBride Hall, it's named after James McBride. Next slide. So I'm not going to talk about James McBride as those other things. What I want to talk about is James McBride as a surveyor. So we didn't even talk about that yet, right? So James McBride was a surveyor, right? And this is his compass. Anybody know where it's located? You want to tell us? It's, yeah, in a case at the Butler County Engineer's Office. So if you want to go over there, they have it in a case, you can take a look at it. And then on the other side, you will also see they have Gunter's chains. So Gunter's chains and compasses were very important. These were what we think of as computers and artificial intelligence. This was state of the art. So this is what James McBride loved to do. He loved to survey. So next slide. Well, one of the things we know about with Gunter's chains is that Gunter's chains took two people to use. One person at one end, one person at the other end. So James McBride at this end, who was at the other end, we think probably was this guy. So John Wardell Irwin, right? So let's talk about John Wardell Irwin. He actually was buried in Greenwood Cemetery as well. So next slide. What do we know about him? He was born in Delaware. He was a Quaker, Scotch-Irish ancestry, just like James McBride. He moved to Richmond first. He learned to survey there, and then he came to Hamilton in about 1836. Okay? And much like James McBride, he did a lot of the same sorts of things. So roads, canals, he did water power, he did things like paper mills and hydraulic canals. He was the editor of an anti-slavery newspaper, and he was one of the founders of Greenwood Cemetery, where he is buried, where James McBride is buried as well, too. So a little known fact. He lived at 103rd Street here in Hamilton. Anyone know where Irwin Street is? Irwin Street? Yeah, it's right around here. You know where the Fenmont is? So what we think of as an alley, that's Irwin Street, right? So think about this guy when you think about Irwin Street. Next slide. So again, go back to James McBride and John Irwin. So again, they were out mapping all of Butler County. McBride, this is the first map of Butler County in 1836. There's a copy of this map out in the hallway. And the Butler County Historical Society has, I think, an original map as well. Upstairs, yes. And again, the important thing is when you look at this, and I put some little red dots on it, one of the things that he was very savvy to put in was he put in ancient works. Okay? So see the little red dots? Ancient work here. What's that? Fortified Hill. Ancient work here, that's by Hind Road. We've got some over here in Fairfield. This is by Pleasant Run. Down here over by maybe Harbin Park. And then over here, this is Coleraine, or maybe this is actually where Ross is. But again, he was very in tune to trying to focus on these ancient works, so much so that he went around and he surveyed these sites. And we're going to look at some of the sites that he surveyed. Okay, so next slide. Let's look at them. So he got Rensselaer Forest. Okay, so Metro Parks, he's got one there. 6 miles south of Hamilton. He was up in Piqua. He was in Dayton. So these are sites that he did. Over here, 7 Mile Creek, right? So that's it, where 7 Mile and 4 Mile come together. 4 Mile Creek. 4 miles south of Hamilton, this is James McBride and John Irwin again, looking at some survey data and then making maps of it. Next slide. Boy, I thought he was done, but no, he's got some more. This is Bantus Creek. This is Preble County, right, where Twin Creek is. How about Fort Old Coleraine? Another site that he did as well, too. Again, we're not done yet. Wow, he just keeps doing more. Below Dayton, he's got one here. He's got one, again, we talked about Pleasant Run in Fairfield. This is 7 miles below Hamilton. Did Somerville, right? So Somerville's gone. It's now a gravel pit, yeah. And then 9 Mile Creek, you know where that is? 9 Mile, where 7 Mile, 9 Mile is. So it's just outside of 7 Mile. There's a small little creek. It's called 9 Mile Creek, and that's there. And then 4 miles below Hamilton, again, another site that he did. Not done yet. Go on to the next slide. He also went out to eastern Butler County, so Mill Creek, and then he went up to Winchester, Indiana. This is by Muncie, so one of the last ones that he did. Again, and all of these that we just showed you, believe it or not, they're all in that book right there. Okay? Ancient
Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, 1847, I think, or 46.
1848. 1847 was when it was, I think, ready, and then 1848. And then obviously the most important and the one that everyone remembers James McBride for, if we go to the next slide, is not this one, but this one. I like this one too. This was the Great Miami River Valley. So again, talks about some of the sites. So Fortified Hill. Again, we got these ones over in Fairfield, some of these over in Fairfield. This is Ross, this is Coleraine. But then the next one, I'm sorry, go ahead, is Fortified Hill. So this is the one that was in the Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. And this was by Squire and Davis, right? So this was the first publication of the Smithsonian Institution. So big deal, right? Let's go on to some intrigue here. So anybody remember Facebook? Yeah? Well, in 1847, the Cincinnati Daily Gazette was Facebook, okay? It was everything that you thought about was in the Cincinnati Daily Gazette. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I went down to the Cincinnati Public Library, and I found this article. This is from 1847. This is an editorial, and the editorial was about how wonderful that Squire was going to publish, or actually had published some manuscripts about the Ohio mounds, okay? And they talked about it, and you can read it again. One of love, whole soul, plain, and perspicuous style. I mean, I love that, right? And he mentions Davis. He mentions future publication of the Smithsonian Institution. He even mentions Fortified Hill, the editorialist does, right? So this is on December 2nd, right? 4 days later, December 6th, right? We get a correspondence. Who is JWE? Anybody know? That's Irwin, right? So that's Irwin. He says, wait a minute. James McBride, to my surprise, got no credit for everything that Squire put in this publication. And he gave these things to Squire with the express understanding that he be credited with them, right? And he talks about the works in Butler County, 12 to 13. We showed you a bunch of those already. And again, no desire to acquire fame at the expense of others, but in order that at some point in the future he publish it to the world, and he would hope that the Smithsonian Institution would credit McBride for those publications, for those things that they surveyed together. I found that fascinating. So again, this is actually from the Cincinnati Daily Gazette. So go on to the next one. So let's talk a little bit about 10 years later, James McBride unfortunately did pass away. Okay? And this is his will. If you go to the Butler County Archives, it's over there. I took a picture of it and I read it. And basically it talks about, I remember his 5,000 volume set. So he said, I don't want that to be taken and just disappeared. I want it to be given to a public library or institution, right? And then he said he's got a cabinet in his room at Hamilton House being the hotel that he started. And again, he wanted it private sale, deemed proper, retained altogether, and not divided and disposed of to some public institution in the West if it can be done to advantage, right? This is the president of trustees of Miami University, right? This is before Clark, the Lane Public Library started, so that was a couple years later, about 10 years later, so there was no public library here. But he's saying, I really want kind of this to go somewhere, but he didn't give it to Miami. You'd think, wow, why wouldn't he give it to Miami? Well, maybe Miami just wasn't ready for it. You know, maybe Miami at that point in 1859 just wasn't available, wasn't capable of having the documents. So guess what happened? Next slide. Go back to the Cincinnati Daily Gazette, right? So again, Facebook of 1849 and 1850, right? 1860. So this is basically his cabinet. Rare collection of shells, fossils, geological specimens, Indian antiquities, and books of drawings being sold. Right? Being sold. Right? Yeah. So, you know, that's what, you know, John Peck, who was the lawyer that was taking care of the estate, was basically told to do by the family. So he had, I think, 5 children. One of them had preceded him in death, so there were 4 children that were left. And then the Hamilton House, a couple years later, same thing, in the Daily Gazette, sold. So, yeah. That's a good question, and we don't know the answer to that, so we'd have to look. Next one. And now I'm going to let Bob talk a little.
Okay, so we wanted to mention, you guys are all familiar with UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So back in 2023, a couple of years ago, they were inscribed on the World Heritage List. And this is 8 sites. The closest one to us here is Fort Ancient. And we'll talk about Fort Ancient in a second. But I have them on a panel. Rather than go through these on slides, I just brought this up here. These are the 8 sites. There is Fort Ancient. You can see the one that stands out is different than everyone else. What gets the attention here is these geometric earthworks with the circles and the squares and the octagons. That's the ones that get the attention. These hilltop enclosures, which we're talking about here tonight, they really didn't get a lot of attention. And interestingly enough, many of these were destroyed because these are in bottomlands. These are on very tillable land along major streams. So they were plowed away or they were developed. The reason we have a lot of these hilltop enclosures remaining is because the land is not that valuable. They're sitting up on a high piece of ground, and they're not level. So a lot of these have remained, which is great for us. But if you go through this, so there's the Great Circle Earthworks and Octagon Earthworks. These are in Newark. And you guys probably, if you've watched the news, you can see there's a golf course here in the middle of this. That golf course is no longer. So Ohio History Connection had leased that land to the country club up there. But then they realized when UNESCO, the World Heritage came, World Heritage says, well, we don't like a golf course on this. We don't know if we're going to inscribe it. And so the Ohio History Connection went to the country club and says, we want to break the lease. And the country club says, we don't want to break the lease. So this went back and forth in court 3 times until just recently they have decided on a sale price for it. And Ohio History Connection has now taken over the site. And the interesting thing, and I'll just say that they're finding out that now they have to decide how are they going to cut the grass and do stuff, because the grass was cut because it was a golf course. It was cut. So how do we maintain the grass in a respectful way and still have the earthwork open? So they're learning as they go. Obviously, Fort Ancient, I'm sure many of you guys have been to Fort Ancient. It is, and as we'll talk about, this is the mother of all hilltop enclosures. None of them come close. In fact, of the ones that I'm going to talk about, you could put all of them inside of it. So this is 100 acres plus. And it has 80 or 90 gateways. You can see all these gateways. Over here we have Mound City. That's the Hopewell National Historical Park is there. So there was a museum right here when you go in. This was also a World War I training camp. Then we have High Bank Works, Hopewell Earthworks, Hopewell Mountain Group, and SIPE. All of these are in the vicinity of Chillicothe, either along the Scioto or along Paint Creek. So they're all very near each other. So this is really the odd man out, and this is up at Newark. So they are sort of spread around a little bit geographically. We don't necessarily understand why they were doing it, but I will tell you that there is very precise geometry. So there are 5 sites in the Scioto Valley up there that have circles and squares in different forms. The area within the circles is all the same, and the areas within the squares are all the same. So the circles are 40 acres, the squares are 27. And if you take the square and set it inside the circle, it fits perfectly. So they understood that geometry. What they were trying to accomplish, we're not exactly sure, but they did understand the geometry. The next one. So another one, so Miami Fort. You guys are familiar with Miami Fort. This is in Shawnee Lookout Park, so it's the very edge of Ohio down there. So it overlooks you can see Kentucky and Indiana from the top. And there are also forts. There's a fort on the Indiana side called Glen Fort. And then there's one on the Kentucky side. So there's three of them there. So where the Great Miami comes in the mouth of it. So there are one at each of those. So you'll see one of the themes you'll see on these hilltop enclosures tend to occur with very fantastic views. So you can see long distances. So this is 12 acres, you can see. So 100 acres, that's 12. And if you want to build a 12-acre enclosure, it's going to take you a long time. Building 100, I don't know how they... Although this was built in stages. So this section was added at one point. Next. So, and we had talked about this one before. So this is the Rensselaer one. And look, it's 17 acres. So it's a little bigger. And this is a LiDAR map. We'll talk about LiDAR in a second. But you can see it. And it's above. There's the Great Miami River. So it has an overlook over that valley. And Route 4 sits right down here. Next. So one of the things we wanted to do when we put all this together, we had a management plan. And so the management plan is not only for us as archaeologists, but it's for Pyramid Hill, how to manage the site. It's also for docents who are doing the tours at the sites so that we can put all this information together in one place. So we went through and let's find all the historical maps that we find them. So let's show the first one here. So this map is a complete mystery. This sort of showed up right in the beginning of this when we were really starting to write this management plan. It showed up, and my recollection is, it came from here. Somebody told me that Butler County Historical Society was involved. They had brought it in. Some other people think it was Lane Public Library. We don't know, but all of a sudden we got this map. And if you look at, this is a surveyor's map. Look at the angles. So they're all harsh angles. So he surveyed here, 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 here. And then at the end, you sort of smooth these out to make a map. My view is I think this is a very early, it could be an Irwin map or a McBride map, or the two of them together, before they actually made this nice, pretty map, which you're going to see in a second. Show me the next one. So this is McBride's map, and sorry for the, this is Ohio History Connection, the original map, but you can see these are the earthwork walls coming around. And what I want to call your attention to, and we'll see it better on the next one, but look at, this is 16 acres. So even this one is a little smaller than the Rensselaer one. And it's a further away from the Great Miami. But as I mentioned before, if you're down here at this southern end and the leaves are off the trees, you can see the DuPont generating station, and you can see 10 miles on the other side of Hamilton up the Great Miami. So I don't know how long that is, but that's probably 30-something miles you can see along the river. So it's a tremendous view. Show me the next one. So this is what it looks like when it was all cleaned up. So, and what he was talking about in the thing that Irwin saw, well, you're not giving James McBride credit, but he did, finally. You can see, surveyed by James McBride, 1836. So when they published this, his name got in it. The one from the year before was a transaction. So that's the one where this comes out of. Yes. So it's within this. So they made it look pretty. So you can see they're showing you the declination of the hills, the streams going around, vegetation on the inside. But I want to call your attention. So there are two mounds here. Only one of shows on this mound, and it's still there. And you're gonna see that. There's another mound down here. It sits right about here, I'm doing the one off of it, so the Werner Mound, it sits off of it. Both of them have been messed with and looted. But look at there are 4 gateways. So the north gate, the east gate, the south gate, and the west gate. The west gate is not visible at all. Everything on this side is very low, and it's suffered not only from erosion, but these walls are downhill. So the area on the very top of this inside is at least 40 to 50 feet higher in places than the actual embankment walls, which is unusual for one of these hilltop enclosures. So we can't see much over here, but we can follow it on LiDAR, which you'll see in a second. But look at the baffled entrances that you see up here. So here's an entrance, and you have to come through these baffled entrances to come in. And all of them had water originally, and these two still do. There's 2 ponds here, and there are 2 ponds here, and they still hold water. This one holds water almost year-round. So when you walked into this, think of this as a sacred site, you're going into these entrances. Not only is it steering you in, you have to go through water to get in. We think it may be sort of a cleansing ritual to go inside of the earthwork. So think of this as inside of a church. This is outside the church. Next. So the next map, and this is another person we haven't talked about. So J.P. McLean. Have you guys heard of J.P. McLean? So he did a tremendous amount of work where McBride mostly spent his time on earthworks. McLean surveyed anything he could, including village sites, campsites, all the mounds. And by the way, Butler County has the second highest number of mounds in the state of Ohio, any county. Hamilton County, I think, is third. Most of the mounds are down here in the southwest corner of the state. So all he did was he looked at McBride's map and says, well, I don't have copyright to use that map, but I'll just redraw it, which is what he's done. He didn't really change anything. He did show another mound down here, which we really haven't been able to find, but he's just checking in and see. And notice he calls these dug holes. That's what we're referring to as ponds. These are actual vernal ponds, and they have all the stuff that you would expect, all the salamanders and stuff that you would expect to be in them. So they're pretty cool biologically as well. The next. So, and then this is, if you want to get sloppy, this is, so in 83, in one of his books, McLean did it again, and I don't know if he was drinking or, this is like, it's like a caricature. It's not really a map. But he published this. But he also published the mound. So this is the mound that is to the east, and he gives us a mound profile. So they cut through it, and we're seeing stuff, and there was a burial down here. Next slide. And then E.O. Randall, are we going to say his name, or are you going to do that? Okay, well, okay. Because I always wondered, whenever you see his name, it's always E.O. Randall, and I thought, who goes by E.O. Randall? And when we show it to you, you'll find out why it's E.O. So Randall essentially redrew the map again from McBride. The takeaway thing of this is McBride drew the best map, and everyone copied it, or copied it poorly, one or the other. So the McBride map is still the best map, and when we show you LiDAR against McBride's map, you'll see. So here he is. This is why he's EO. Emilius Oviatt. What parent would do that to their child? I have no idea. But so the great thing about this is we have photographs. So within this, so here's the view of the Great Miami River from the top of it, from near Fortified Hill. And then here's another view up here. On the walls, there's also another view he has of one of the mounds, I believe, and here as well. So we start to see the first photographs of it, and we can put together that things have changed. So you can see the landform, the topography, and the vegetation, and see what's going on. I think this is you.
All right, I'm going to take up with the more recent history. So I'm going to start with Ron Hodap. Anybody know who Ron Hodap is? Yeah, we know, okay. So Ron actually was the owner of the site back in the 70s. And so he was the one that actually went to the Cincinnati Enquirer, and he tried to get the Ohio Historical Society, which is the Ohio OHIC, which is Ohio History Connection, to purchase the site. But they didn't have the money, and they declined to purchase it. So he talked about it, and he sold it to someone, which we're going to talk about next. But the other important thing is there's a beautiful picture of him leaning here against what we think is probably the north wall. Okay? Take a look at that. One of the things that you'll notice is that it's very clear there, right? No honeysuckle. Somebody already said it. No honeysuckle. So again, he also collected things from the area as well too. If we can go to the next slide. Somebody else also, somebody that was near and dear to my heart, Jim Blount. I went to school with his son. Jim Blount obviously was interested in history of this site as well too. He wrote in 2008 an article about it. If you read through it, he talks about Chet Trione, who was the first Ohio History Connection or Ohio Historical Society president. Is that right? Chitrone, yeah, yeah. And but he talks about the Hind Mound, and he talks about some different things, but then he goes over and talks about 17 acres. So he's kind of talking about different sites possibly, but ultimately he's talking about the history of this area. So, and then we get to the reason that I got involved. So here he is. He was definitely an interesting character to say the least. If anybody knew him, this was a friend of mine, Lou Barrich. He was a dermatologist. He was president of the Butler County Medical Society. He was obviously somebody that owned the farm. He purchased it from Ron Hodap. And to me, he always suggested that he wanted to save this site. And his wife talked about wanting to save this site. But unfortunately, when he passed away without a will. Yeah. No children, right? And so I heard about this and I thought, that's just not right. I mean, this is not right. We need to make this right. And so initially when I found out that he passed away, I thought, I'm going to do this for Lou Barrich, and I'm going to do this for the people that built this site because I think it's the right thing to do. So I started calling people. And this was back in December and January of that year. And I called people. And I would say, I'm talking about Fortified Hill. And they would be like, what? Never heard of it. Who cares? Don't have money. And I just kept calling people. And I just kept calling people. And it got to be about probably May. And I finally called the Ohio History Connection. And I talked to a person there who was actually the receptionist. And I think her name was Amber. And so I talked to her and I said, I'm calling about Fortified Hill. She said, Fortified Hill, that kind of rings a bell. And this was on a Wednesday. And it was early in the morning, about 9 o'clock when I called. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I got an email. And you could see there was an email chain that went through about probably 7 different people until I got to this one guy. And then he said, I'm going to call you. And this was at 3 o'clock that day. He said, you know about Fortified Hill? And I said, yes, and I want to save it. And it was actually somebody from the Ohio History Connection. So that's really where we got involved. So next slide. Somebody that was very close to Lou Barrich at that time also and was basically a neighbor to Lou Barrich was Harry T. Wilkes. Everybody know Harry T. Wilkes, right? So Harry T. Wilkes was a graduate of Miami. He was a trustee of Miami too, just like James McBride. Attorney, businessman, philanthropist. He started Pyramid Hill. And just like Lou, Harry was very interesting character as well, too. I think at one point I have on good knowledge that Harry asked Lou to just give him the property. Yeah, Lou was never going to do that. If you know Lou, Lou would never do that. And Harry would always ask that question, but it was just never going to happen. So go on to the next slide. So what happened? Well, we tried to save Fortified Hill. And what happened was the heir said, we want to have an auction. Why? Because we want to get the most money for this place, because we want to keep the money. We don't care about the site. And so one of the things that I would tell every one of you, and you're all of age now, that you should have a will. If you don't have a will, go home tomorrow or go home tonight. Put a note down that you're going to talk to a lawyer tomorrow and you're going to get a will. And the other thing is, make it clear what you want. We already know what James McBride did. Now we're seeing the same thing, with Lou Barrich. Again, not being clear about what you want, what your wishes are. So make your wishes known, make them clear. So again, honor a friend's wish. Again, in terms of honor the builders of this site because it's such a historic site for this area. So remain positive. I got a lot of no's. I spent months calling people and a lot of no's, not people interested in it. And then finally, you just got to be positive. People are going to be interested in this site, and you got to talk to the right people eventually. And we did social media, we did television, we did radio spots. Many of you obviously probably saw them, and hopefully were supportive of that at the time. And then also I want to surely thank Nancy Lonnie. She's the daughter of Harry T. Wilkes. And she was the one that was very interested, that we brought her out to the site. We talked about the importance of saving this site. And so then she talked to her sister Barb, And together they decided that the Harry T. Wilkes Foundation would purchase the site and then donate it to Pyramid Hill so that it could be preserved. So we have to thank them for that. Slide.
Okay, I had promised that we would talk about LiDAR. How many of you guys have heard of LiDAR? Oh my God. Really? Okay. Well, for the 2 or 3 who haven't heard of it, it's light direction and ranging. So essentially, you can fly an airplane and shoot a whole bunch of lasers at different angles, and they bounce back and reflect. The cool thing about it is, that, I mean, that's old technology, but they can see through a forest canopy because there's so many of them. So they can find things. And so if you're on the ground, one of the worst perspectives, and any archaeologist will tell you, standing on the ground trying to see what's in front of you, you can't tell. Subtle things just don't show up. Your brain doesn't work that way. But these lasers can detect, and some of these ones they have now are good for 10, 12 inches or less. They can tell. So they will map what's on the ground. You can be standing in the middle of one of these, you wouldn't even know it. It'll show you on the ground. So you've probably seen these being used in the forests in Mesoamerica, looking for Mayan sites and things. So they're finding these sites they didn't know about by just looking at LiDAR data. And they show up, and then they go out, and, oh, sure enough, there's a temple here, and no one knew about it. So this is all free. You can download this stuff if you want to do this. But just to give you an example, so this is a LiDAR map of Fortified Hill. So this is the area. This is Hamlin up here where we are, but there is the Fortified Hill on this LiDAR map. And it's a contour map, and it's showing there's this ridge line coming down. It's at the terminal edge of this ridge. And here it is, and it actually shows. You can it's hard to see this, but you can see it. Even the walls that we can't find on the west side show on the map. Very faint, but they are there. Next slide. So let's look at the LiDAR map and look at McBride's accuracy when we look at some of this. So this is the McBride map. This is the 2017 LiDAR. So this is very high resolution. I mean, it's perfect. And you can actually see the gateways and these baffled entrances at the gateways coming in as well. Next slide. And this is really cool. So this is a blow-up of McBride's map. So these are the 2 great gateways down here, the East Gate and the South Gate. And they're like reverse question marks if you look at them. So you got to go in through water, through the baffles, same way with this one. And look, this is LiDAR. They're just like, isn't it amazing? Oh, he was really good at what he did, or Irwin was good at what he did. One of them, these are really mapped well. I'm assuming that some of this was probably not forested. It would have been much more difficult if it was forested. I think a lot of this, we know at least a lot of it, one time it was cultivated. It was under cultivation. So at least the north part of it. So, but this is amazing. When I saw this, it's like, this is why people copied McBride's map. It's so damn good. Next slide. So we also used remote sensing, and there's a number of different methods of remote sensing that are being used today around the world. Magnetometry is probably the #1 way that we look. So this is looking below the ground. So what we just saw, LiDAR, is what's above grade. Magnetometry, resistivity, conductivity, ground penetrating radar, they look below the grade, below the ground, to see what's there. So this is Jared Burks here, a friend of ours who did the work out there, and this is an array. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dual magnetometers on this sort of Ben-Hur chariot here that he's pushing with a touchpad here. It's very lightweight, so he can just push this thing around. And now that if you have open space, you can actually tow it with a vehicle, as long as you can't have ferrous metal anywhere near them. So when he usually does this, you don't have metal grommets in your shoes, you don't have metal belts, so you tie a rope. Look like Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies doing this. But it'll see below the ground. Next slide. So just the way magnetometry works is, so we're constantly being bathed in magnetic fields. This magnetometry looks at disruptions to the field. Just to give you an example, if you're doing this on a plowed surface, if you pass it over a nail, it will blow a hole in your map this big. That's how sensitive it is. What we're looking for is stuff that is much, much less. And the things that trigger magnetometries more than anything is burning. So if you burn a surface, you would have a pit. If it has burned rock in it, it has burned pottery, that will show up. And it'll show patterns. But it also will show filled ditches and things like that. It'll show anything that's different. So this is, we're going to show you some of the magnetometry to them. So this is where, so at some point, we're going to build a parking lot here, or Pyramid Hill will. This is at the end of Sky Meadow Drive here. And this is the north mound. The earthwork itself is actually below this, and we'll get to that slide in a second. But the magnetometry can look at, so here's a fence line, an iron fence line. You can see it. It shows up in the magnetometry because it's ferrous metal. Any of these pits, you can see these black things. These are probably archaeological features. If they have a halo around them, like these, or a halo inside, it's usually metal. So we have there's actually a building, an old residence inside the woods right here. Next slide. So this is inside the earth. So here's McBride's map again, coming around. And you can see most of this is forested. Vast majority of it, except for the very center. And this is in hay. So they, do this because they keep it in agriculture. And you can see there are two areas here that are extreme interest to us, and these are areas of burning. One here and one here. Also, we're seeing those, if you remember, McBride has those baffled entrances. We think that's what this is. And there are a few pit features up here. So all in all, the magnetometry is not showing a whole lot going on with this, and this gets to the point, these are not places where people lived. So these are ceremonial or sacred sites. They would be used maybe even infrequently. So you're not going to find what you would the village site where there's just one pit intruding onto another. Next slide. So yeah, so here you can see this is the north gate. So come, and I love this view because it doesn't have the vegetation on it. It's almost like there's been a fire here. But you can see when you walk in, there's a person in the gate. So you have to walk around this in here, through water, up and out, up to the top. And the walls themselves, you can see, it's like a spine back. The walls are further down along the edges. And then the Werner Mound is over here. Next slide. So you can see, well, we're going to talk about clearing here in a second, is what it is. But this is, when we got there, it was honeysuckle heaven, and it still is. I mean, there's no way we would ever clear all that honeysuckle off. So we're being very selective in what we do. So we've cleared it off, this north mound, because it's within the area where we're running tours through. And we've taken off parts of the embankment walls. The honeysuckle was very bad where the forest edge is, where the field, when it opens, it's just awful there. When you get into the canopy, it's much less, and so the walls down at the east gate are not that bad. We haven't had to do all that much there. But there are sections of it, it's just the honeysuckle is just... And if any of you guys have ever tried to cut honeysuckle, and I mean, it is the hardest wood that any of us have ever seen. So we have painted the stumps when we cut them, but they will still come back. So it's the thing you have to keep going back every year to do. But this is sort of what it looked like. So this is yours. Okay, well, so we decided that we were going to start clearing this, and so volunteers here. This is a longtime adjunct at the museum, Ted Sunderhouse, who not only is he very knowledgeable about that stuff, he has several chainsaws, which comes in handy. So, and there you can see him here again with chainsaws. And so we had all these volunteers. So we were doing this, I don't know, it seems like every 3 or 4 weeks we were out there. If the weather was good, we'd have a bunch of people and we would clear it, and then we wanted it chipped. At first we were going to chip all this because we were creating trails, but that doesn't work because the company who actually chipped it decided they were going to haul away and chip it somewhere else, which is not what we wanted. But Anyway, so we'll get to the trails in a second. But so here's the North Mound, and you can see we've painted stumps up here. So we've took off all the honeysuckle, trying to keep the rest of the trees. No, we don't take these down because that'll disturb the mound. This was a 10-foot mound, and now it's about 2.5, 3 foot tall, maybe at the most. Depends on what angle you view it from, but it has been disturbed, and people have dug it. This is the North Mound again. So we let grass grow on it, and the grass is so far is keeping the honeysuckle from coming back at least a lot. There's some, but it seems to be working, and it seems to identify the mound. It's only growing on this mound right here. So, next slide. So so if you go in, if you're facing south and you go in that gate and you look to the left, this is the wall that you will see, and this is a very prominent wall. It's very easy to see. I would hazard to say that this is 5 to 6 foot tall as compared to the outside out here. On the inside of the earth, not as tall, but on the outside, it's much taller. Very easy to see. Next slide. And the ponds. I talked about the ponds. So we got there. You can see this is frozen water. And there's the embankment walls going up. This is the actual gateway here where you come in through the pond, up through the baffled entrance. There's the Great Miami Valley in the background. Next slide. Here's the pond. Again, in the winter, the pond freezes over. It's really cool to see. So you can see the wall. So on one side, coming up like this and turning this way, another pond forms up here. If we get a lot of precipitation, the water will also pool up here as well. The gateway itself is over on this side. Next slide. So then we started building trails. We thought, we can't just have people walking everywhere in here, so we decided to put a trail. And then we had to think, where do we want the trails to go? Where do we not want the trails to go? We don't want people actually walking on the embankment walls because it's a sacred site, so we're taking them around so they have a view. We're also looking at building an observation tower, and hopefully that's something we'll get to within the next year. So we lined where we wanted to trail, and then we brought in mulch, and we couldn't get vehicles back there, so this had to be done with wheelbarrows. So they dumped the mulch at the top of that field, and then we had crews that would shovel it into wheelbarrows, take it down and dump it, and how many weeks did that take? This is a long trail. It took a long time, and you get all the way down there, and then you have to go back and get another load. So, but I don't know how many. I think we did 3 of those big dump loads full of mulch, and they were big. I mean, they were almost as tall as this room. So she did. She did. Next one.
So this is just everybody that obviously.
Yeah, so here's another group of folks who were out clearing. I love the guy with the dog on his arm up here. So, next slide. And this is at the auction. You can see Jeff here. This is a member of the Archaeological Conservancy, and then Nancy Lonnie. I was at the auction too. I don't go to many auctions, and this was fun. I particularly like when they were doing this. So we were there. It wasn't the only thing that was being. He sold lots of property, and these guys would get in your face, like, they would go around. The auctioneers at the front, but the guy would come around to somebody and go up like this. Never. They just said, "What would you like to do?" And I thought it was wonderful. They knew better. She would just raise her hand, raise it up a little bit. It was fun. It was very fun to watch, and Jared was in I don't know, Cambodia at the time or something, or Europe. I think he was in Belgium or Poland. So he was texting me, "What's going on?" I said, "She just acquired it." So next slide. So native partners. So when we did this through the museum, our partners that we have doing the NAGPR work, and we have 17 tribal partners that have met with us at the museum, and we've talked remotely to 30 others, but not all of them are descendant communities for people who lived here. So we chose ones, the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma, which obvious, because they have the Miami Center up at Miami University as well. The Shawnee Tribe, also in Oklahoma. Now, there are 3 Shawnee tribes. There's Eastern Shawnee and the Absentee Shawnee, but we chose, the Shawnee has the most bandwidth, should I say, the people working to do it. Also the Wyandotte, also in Oklahoma, and the Delaware Nation in Oklahoma as well. So they reviewed all the stuff. They suggested what they want on the script. So there are signs out there. We don't have images of those signs, do we? So there's beautiful sleds that Pyramid Hill bought. They're sort of Z-shaped. You can stake them in the ground, or you can move them all day. It takes several people to move them very far. Erica's she's probably tried to move them. They're really difficult to move, but they have signage on them, and they have QR codes on them, and you can you can hear indigenous languages on them, and so forth. So we want it. So the goal is that someone could do a self-tour really if they wanted to. And one of the things we found out is when we did tours that they are more difficult to use with a guided tour because people want to stop and read it, and you're talking. So that's one of the things we want to work out. So these people were very helpful. We still want to involve them in what's going on. So next slide. So any of you guys, Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks, so that there's many sites on this. National Park Service has some stuff on it. Ohio History Connection has stuff on it. Any of these, so the sites that are in this little pamphlet, which I think you can buy. I think it's very cheap. It was like $5 or something for this, and it has much more information than we've given you on these. Pyramid Hill Sculpture Park, which Erica's going to talk about in a second. Heartland Earthworks Conservancy, of which I'm a former trustee of that, and that's a group that wants to preserve, acquire, and educate people about earthworks in Ohio. Jared Burks is on it. Altonetti is on it. You're on it as well. So Ohio History Connection, another good resource. They have a lot of people working on this World Heritage stuff. Butler County Historical Society is another thing to use. Hopewell Cultural National Historic Park, that's where Mound City is in Chillicothe. Another one you can check into. And then, of course, the Lane Public Library, the Cincinnati Public Library, and the one we don't have is the museum's library at Cincinnati Museum Center as well, which has lots of resources I didn't have on the list. Oh, you didn't do the library. Okay. Next. Okay, so the committee. So what I mentioned this briefly. So we formed a committee. Nancy, Lonnie, we all talked, says we need a committee to decide what we're going to do. So it's not just a name. So it's how many pages is this? 32 pages. It has almost everything we've talked about tonight is in this. So we did this again for docents and trustees and other people to see, and it talks about the mission and the vision of that. This is, I think this is the previous version of the exhibit that's at, so you guys have Pyramid Hill has redone those these big graphics, so they're much bigger and much nicer. So if you go up there where the museum is, where the sculpture museum was in there, you should go look at that. Next slide. There is one more. This is